Sorry for the delay. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And remain standing, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for the tragedy in Boston and also in West Texas. Thank you. Okay. Pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Laws 1975, this meeting has been duly advertised in S. Park Press, issue of January 18, 2013, and April 17, 2013. All municipal clerks of the townships and boroughs within the Regional High School District have been duly notified, and the requirements of the posting of notices have been met. Okay. Minutes approval, March 21st and April 8th.
Move.
I'll second it. Yes.
And the second.
Bill.
Mr. Asatola?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mrs. Canario?
Yeah.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes.
Mr. Messinger?
Yes.
Mrs. Sotera?
Yes.
Mr. Mazik?
Yes, except for April 8th. No.
Mr. Moses?
Yes for April 8th. I think I was not here for the 21st, so I have to abstain. Okay, communications are on file in the Board Secretary's office. Reports, Superintendent's report.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moses. Number of items to go over tonight. First and foremost, there's been the state has released their performance reports under their new paradigm and framework for how they're tracking the progress of individual schools. And if you remember, there's a distinction now. Schools used to be categorized into what was known as a district factor group, A through J, and A being the poorest and J being the wealthiest districts in the state of New Jersey. And so the socioeconomic status of a particular town factored into how those schools were compared against one another, school districts. What the state has moved toward now, and I talked about this a few meetings back, are individual school peer groups. So every school has 30 other schools that it is grouped with for comparative purposes. And that means that our 6 high schools all have their own groupings of 30 throughout the state. And some of our high schools appear in the same peer groups and some do not. The driving force behind that determination, as the state tells us, is the percentage of special education students, limited English proficient students, and economically disadvantaged students. That is the categorization for how these peer groups are drawn up. While I applaud the state's effort to give us a lot more data to work with in comparative purposes, there are a number of things that we've been a little bit public about in terms of questioning on how those categorizations are grouped. For example, high-performing districts that do very well, districts like Freehold Regional High School District where we're well over 90% proficient. There is very tight coupling of those school districts. So you may have, and the way the performance reports were designed are that some of the districts in your peer group are performing better than you, and some of those are not performing quite as well as you. So you might have Colts Neck High School that is the middle of pack in somebody's peer group, number 1 in somebody else's peer group, and there's a lot of fluctuation like that. But what happens when you have 30 districts that are all 90% and above proficient is that somebody's got to be at the top of that and somebody's got to be at the bottom of that, and the state is categorizing the performance based on high performing, performing well, lagging, significantly lagging, and you could be a school district that is 95% proficient and be deemed significantly lagging. The difficulty with that is that mathematically it's statistically problematic once you get up over to 95% proficient because the standard deviation of error we don't know. The state doesn't release that. And you're shooting in the dark a little bit as to whether 95% is the same as somebody else's 96% and 97%. So it's a little bit problematic. What I've been in contact with some of the State Department officials through email, just requesting a host of other items that I think should be included in those reports. If you are going to gauge college and career readiness, I think it's important that you note dual enrollment programs. We have a dual enrollment program here at Freehold Regional High School District where a number of our students take college-level courses. I believe that taking college-level courses is a good indicator of college success. I also asked that the ACT be included on that data. Right now, the PSAT is the predominant factor for some of the testing numbers that the state is using to gauge. Here at Freehold Regional, we use the ACT. Somewhere around 22% of the state uses the ACT in some capacity. I was informed that wasn't a large enough subgroup to utilize. A quarter of the state is fairly significant as far as I see it. We like the ACT much better as a diagnostic test for our students because it's much more properly aligned to the Common Core. And our AP numbers, we've put a bullseye for the past couple of years on our AP performance in terms of moving more students into AP, having more students sit for the AP exams, and we put in an AP Summer Bridge program. We've rewarded students who sit for the AP exam with a final exam exemption in those courses. We continue to relax some of the barriers to AP access that may have existed in the past in terms of course sequencing, artificial barriers, I would term them. So we know that we need some work in continuing to improve our AP numbers, and that work is afoot, and I think the performance reports certainly speak to having the need to improve those percentages overall. The state has set a target of 35%. We're not there as a school district, and we are moving forward to make sure that we are there. A couple other issues: the use of the PSAT as a some school districts pay for the PSAT for their students to take. Obviously, any district, if you pay and you have your 10th graders take the PSAT, your numbers are going to shoot up. As I said, we like the ACT. The PSAT, we were told, is only there as a placeholder for the next year or two as the Park online test move in. Candidly, establishing a system of performance reports on data that is going to change within the next year to two is potentially problematic. As the HESPA goes away, as the PSAT is not utilized, and as Park replaces those assessments in terms of how we're gauged, we'll reshuffle the deck again in a year and have to sort that out again. So overall, we have there's some telling information in those reports, but there's a lot of missing information that I would like to see included, and those are all public, of course. A few other items. I had the good fortune last week to travel to Carnegie Hall and see, it was my first trip to Carnegie Hall actually, and to see the Marlboro Concert Band and Choir perform. They performed four pieces, one of which was composed by one of the students, Matthew Liu, which I thought was phenomenal. So it was a terrific evening, and I think that anytime any of our programs are able to be highlighted in that way, it shines a nice light on the Freehold Regional High School District. Would also like to congratulate, I was able to attend last week at Barnes & Noble, my favorite teacher, Carol Kraszewski from Freehold Township, mathematics teacher at Freehold Township. Miss Higley got caught in traffic, so I had to create a little bit of a speech spontaneously, which was fun. But that the way Barnes & Noble does that, I think, is excellent. A teacher has to be nominated in writing by a student, and they do it for all different grade levels. And when the students get up there and read their nominations of teachers, it's rewarding to listen, because the ones that I've attended, the teachers have often no idea that the students feel the way they do until they express themselves in writing, and it's terrific validation for a lot of hard work for those folks. So my congratulations to Carol. Also had last week at Marlboro High School hosted a band festival where each of our concert bands had an in-school field trip and performed for one another in the auditorium, and I think it's a terrific idea. The students were able to interact with one another, see the different pieces that are being performed, and sort of gauge the different styles of each of the concert bands, and it was a joy to be there. We also, a number of the leadership teams, Mr. Boyce, Dr. Hazel, myself, and Mr. Moore attended the Garden State Coalition of Schools Spring Conference last week, where the featured speakers were Dr. Barry Ehrlichson, who's the Chief Academic Officer for the state, Tim Matheny, who is the individual charged with the implementation of the new teacher evaluation system. They participated on a panel with two superintendents, Jordan Schiff from Hillsborough and Brian Osborne from South Orange Maplewood, who are part of the pilot districts with the teacher evaluation. So there was a lively discussion over what that new evaluation system is going to look like. One of the things that we continue to ask and to request is that as the data becomes available for how the utilization of student growth percentiles are impacting teachers' summative evaluations, we'd love to see that data so that we can make some more informed decisions over what that's going to look like. In layman's terms, basically each student is getting a number assigned to them based on their state test scores, particularly if in language arts and mathematics, performance on the NJ-ASC, and that number, those numbers are in a very complicated mathematical way rolled into and attached to an individual teacher, and there's some high stakes at work there in terms of how that impacts the teacher's final evaluation. And when the state of New Jersey was granted the No Child Left Behind waiver, they had promised to put a system like this in place. They're 2 years into a pilot, so one of the things that we'd like to see is some more specific data as we move to implement this in September 1 to see how that is factoring out. So there was some conversations around that, and there's also students are being grouped into peer groups based on their scale scores on those tests, and we'd also like to know how those peer groups are determined and what the different sizes of those various peer groups are as we move forward. As I've said up here ad nauseum, we're moving forward with a ton of training, and we'll be ready to roll forward with the new teacher evaluation come September 1st. We have a significant number of training for teachers scheduled for the remainder of the school year, and a lot of summer training for our administrators. Also, on April 9th, I had the pleasure of serving on a New Jersey School Board's panel discussion on school security and safety with Dr. Moy, the superintendent of Neptune, Mr. Sean Golden, the Monmouth County Sheriff, and the police chief from Neptune. We responded to a video put out by the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office that really highlighted a step-by-step process of an active shooter drill in a school, and it highlighted teachers that performed as they're trained and as they should, and it highlighted some teachers that in the video did not follow the training and some of the outcomes and the potential problems with that. So it was a very well done video, and the conversation, the audience consisted of a number of folks from Monmouth County, and obviously in the wake of Newtown, there are continual concerns with school security, and we talked about some of the changes as a result of Newtown, and in particular highlighted the fact that we felt that our entrances in our schools were where we emphasized some security upgrades as a result of Newtown. Last week I had the good fortune of spending a significant part of my morning at the Freehold Borough K-8 to welcome the new superintendent there, Dr. Tomazik, and it was a wonderful tour of the physical structure. I hadn't been in all of their buildings, and obviously we're looking at ways that we can articulate when you're part of a high school regional and you have a number of K-8s that send to you. Articulation is difficult and time-consuming work, and we had a meeting here today with the K-8 superintendents and myself to continue to build those bridges, and I think that as a group we continue to work collaboratively to make sure that we function as well as possible along a K-12 continuum, pre-K to 12, I should say. And that is my report, Mr. President.
Okay, next up we have board reports. Any board reports?
Should be
Nope.
none.
Seeing none, we have public participation. We have one person who signed up to speak. Oh, 1 second.
Just 3 quick notes on the agenda. In the back of the room, there's K-8, which is an addendum. Also, on page 21, board included, on attachment 1 that is, the school physicians were inadvertently included on that list. They are not employees, they're contracted folks, so please strike those for your list. And also on page 19, the salary listed for Stephen Vella should reflect $82,695. Thank you, Mr. Moses.
Okay, we have one person who signed up for public participation. That was Gloria. Close.
I'm trying to understand the state performance report that the superintendent has stated in the copy. I'm not an educator, so it's somehow difficult for me to fully grasp what you just said in terms of the 30 group here, the 30 grouping or something like that with the special socioeconomic and the other factor. I remember, it just dawned on me, I believe last year when I brought up the topic about the top 100 high schools in Detroit, New Jersey. And I brought it to, I told you that our schools, none of our schools even made the top 100. We all, from 2010 to 11, we declined. And we, from 11 to 12, we further declined. And your response then, Mr. Sampson, was you don't totally agree with the formula. But then I noticed as I was reviewing that, there are other schools that even let's say 2010, 2011, and then from 2011 to 12, if they were, let's say, the number 1 school, in the year 2010-2011, they were rated number 3rd. And then the 2011 to 12, they rated 1. They jumped up. And most of the schools jumped up to the level. But our district is still declined. We're always on this point. I know what you just mentioned about this. Maybe this is a new thing that the Commissioner Surf is imposing to all the schools, which I'm trying to understand still. But my point here is, our district, as you said, has done tremendously in terms of academic. We have hired a lot of people, we have promoted a lot of people, and so on and so on. So much money has been poured into education. But my thing here is I hope that we can bring up Freehold Regional, because it's a shame that we don't even make the top 100. And I hope that this year, when the new report comes out, we can at least be on the 97, not over 100. Because it's just like, it's supposedly great district. Okay, so mentioned that you are not in total agreement with some formula. But I hope that if that's the case, are the other schools having the same problem, not agreeing with the formula, then maybe you can coordinate that and bring that to the commissioner, sir, and let him understand what is the problem with the formula that you are not in agreement with. That's the only thing on that part. Now, my other question is, 2 meetings ago, I spoke about the drug situation in my school, Manalapan High School. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it at the last meeting. As you all know, something happened again. And I mentioned at the time that in the past, they were talking about bringing the dog, the sleeping dog, to go, sleep the lockers and everything. And somebody said maybe they should also, check the lockers of the staff and everything. Some people laughed, like it was a joke. And then what happened last week. This is your third presentation on the substance abuse. And I asked you the last time, when you mentioned proactively addressing the problem, you still have not really given us where are we at in terms of the drug situation in Manalapan High School. I was told again there's a lot of drug busting there. There's a lot of children, and I would not say children, students, and some adults are dealing drugs. How are we going to control this? I mean, we can have the most spectacular academic, but if our school is infested with drugs, it's a problem. And so far, like I said, this is your third presentation 2 meetings ago. And I ask you again, how are the drug problems in my school, I won't talk about my school in Manalapan, how is it being addressed? And I will sit down, then I will not get a response again. So please, when I sit down, I will lose my time. I would appreciate a response this time. Thank you very much.
I think I've responded clearly every time, but Dr. Hazel, can you go over a number of the programs, interventions, and proactive measures that we've presented on 3 separate times here again, please?
Sure. Mrs. Close and for the audience. Specifically, Mrs. Close, specifically this year, Mrs. Sharp and myself, as well as the building principals, convened a meeting. This year we have partnered with an addiction specialist who's working with our staff, who's also working with our student programs. We're working on that this year. He's been in all of our buildings. He's still working on training and speaking with our staff. We're really trying to take a proactive approach. As I said, we have a SAC counselor, a student assistance counselor in every building, working hand in hand with the principal and the building administrators. I think all of us, our heads are not in the sand on this issue. Our principals are extremely proactive in our buildings. If we happen to catch students or we know of situations, we are working hand in hand with counselors and with the families to work on each of those cases on an individual basis. But as a whole, we are addressing the matter. We are working with our families. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be convening when we work on our student family handbook. We have a committee of principals and assistant principals that work with us, reviewing our policies. We are going to, review all policies around random searches and see if our district is going to take some next steps, in those venues.
And
but on a whole, we are fully addressing it.
And I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Sure.
I just want to ask one question. So overall, where are we at right now? Like I said, it was devastating last week when that came up in the paper. Okay, that horror confession or something. You know what I mean? That was in the paper. It's just devastating to see that. And then you hear the feedback from his parents. And I told him, please come here. This is the proper venue for you to make it known. But still, where are they? None. Okay? The point is they always go, drugs. It's so high in Manalapan. So now I hear what you say. So, but the way you look at it, what is really the actual situation? Because everywhere I hear, drugs. Kids are dealing, kids are using, and then you have addressing what is going on right now so that the public will know. Because the saying, like your PowerPoint, boom, boom, boom. It looks so nice. You know? Well, it doesn't make any sense when every time you hear problems like that particular individual was busted. I mean, it's just upsetting, like I said, we're putting all these things on education, and somehow we have to address this because this is a disease. Okay, if you don't stop this, no matter how smart or whatever APs you offer, isn't going to work. If there is a big population in our school that are in that having that problem, it's going to be unfortunate. That's all what I'm saying. Because like I said, it breaks my heart to hear it constantly. I'm out there in the public and I hear it from the parents. And I beg them to come here, speak up here, tell you straight to your faces what is going on. Nobody wants to come.
Yeah, I mean, within the walls of our high school, we're taking, a lot of extra steps even this school year. It's also part of our health curriculum. So every student goes through that program. Our SAC counselors are in the classrooms. Our principals set up special auditorium programs to discuss this topic. And again, we work individually with families when something does come to our attention. Again, you see some of those numbers. Our administrators are extremely vigilant and ensuring that if there's anything going on, that we're going to address it and take those proactive steps so that those numbers and those cases go down.
How do you address the ones who are using it silently in the school that you cannot detect? It's impossible, right?
Yeah, that's why our committee is all coming together to see, some other additional steps, if there are any, that we can take. But we do have a committee that's going to be meeting over the next couple weeks, and anything that comes out of that committee will be, reviewed with the board and with the superintendent.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, Mr. Mazik brought up a good point on to go back to the performance reports just for a second. So one of the, Ms. Close, you brought up a very good point about sort of marshaling folks together and questioning some of the how data is disseminated for those reports. And one school district in northern New Jersey, I'm not going to name the district, but they sent out a spreadsheet with their determination. They were deemed significantly lagging. I'm sorry, lagging. They're significantly lagging. There's some lagging. There's performing well, high performing. And what they were able to show is that they were 94.5% proficient on the state assessments, which is very high, and they're closely coupled with a number of other very high performing school districts. And if 5 more students in their school were proficient, they would go from lagging to high performing. So that's how tightly coupled some of this grouping is, and it was a point well taken in saying, "Hey, are you getting together with other schools and saying you have a question?" Absolutely. Through the Garden State Coalition of Schools, through our regional superintendents consortium that we have here, through our county roundtables, and through other professional organizations, especially through NJSA, where Dr. Boss is the president of that. He's been down in Trenton questioning the use of some of these statistics and what it means. So agree with you 100%. But that work is unfolding and saying, if we're going to use these data points, then we have to make sure we understand what those data points mean, and we have to open the door to include other things that may also capture student achievement. And I've said we had our academic and extracurricular awards at the last board meeting, and there was a young man from Marlboro who spent a summer vacation raising somewhere around $15,000 as an Eagle Scout project, and goes down to, I believe, South America and builds a school, and then builds a library. And I'm not quite sure, his HESPA score doesn't get measured in achievement. And we have to be very careful that state tests and the such are one barometer, one indicator of student achievement and student expertise and what kids come out with being ready for the real world. So point very well taken about getting other voices together to say we have some questions around this.
Okay. Is there anybody else? Okay, that brings us to the agenda. Before Yeah, yeah. Before we take the agenda, Jen, and before we do that, can I have a motion that we take the agenda all in one shot before we take our 5-second break?
5 minutes.
We're voting on the agenda before we take a break?
No, we're not. I'm asking if we can take the agenda in one shot.
Yeah, motion after the 5-minute break.
Right.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, we're just going to take a couple-minute break before we do the vote. Okay, we're back. Less than 5 minutes.
Yep.
Never let it be said that we're not quick.
Are we rescinding issue?
Does he not want to stop and relax?
We are. Okay. A couple items. Prior to that brief recess, there was a motion to authorize the entire agenda being taken in one motion. That's my understanding of that motion, correct? So what we're going to do is vote on that, and then we'll need a motion and a second for the agenda. Okay?
Got it.
As I understand it. Okay, so I'm sorry, I don't recall who was the first and second on that.
I was the first.
I'm second.
Bruno. Thank you. Mr. Asatola?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes, but I'm present, taking,
This is just whether or not we should.
go ahead myself. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Mrs. Canario?
Yes.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes.
Mr. Messinger?
Yes.
Mrs. Sutera?
Yes.
Ms. Tomazic?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes, and I would like to ask that whoever wrote Robert's rules show up.
So,
His name was Roberts. His name Robert?
It was actually Dr. Roberts.
so, okay. So, Hash.
I might be in my name that you told me to do this.
Very good. All right, if I may, Mr. Moses, can I just amend? I'd like to take a motion on for the entire agenda, including the addendum K8, and as amended to table K2. And so that is the motion I'm looking for.
I make that motion.
Thank you, Hesh. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any comments?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I have issues on H2 because some of the numbers in attachment number 1 completely fly in the face of my reading of the situation back from September 24th. And I'm not, I can't sit here and name names. That's not my place. I'm not the personnel manager or superintendent here, but I have big issues with a lot of numbers on there.
Is that issue with, are you talking about the salary?
Yeah, attachment number 1.
Oh, attachment number 1.
Yes. Which is part of H2.
Okay.
Are you referring to associations or people that are not in associations?
It's names. I'm not comfortable in this form coming out, mentioning people's names.
Okay. Anyone else?
Can I respond to that briefly?
Sure.
Because the question, I think, is an important question. And, without knowing which line item, and I respect why you're not mentioning names, we don't know exactly which. But I just want to mention to the board that certain of these increases are consistent with the collective bargaining agreements which have been settled. And those agreements are contractual agreements that you've already have been vetted, you've approved. So those are binding. If there are others non-affiliated that the superintendent and others are recommending, that's another matter. But if we have, and there obviously has to be some good faith basis, some bona fide basis to not accept that recommendation. We've talked about that before. You have training on that. I'm not going to lecture you here tonight. But just for purposes of the record and the board's general awareness, if we have an individual who is within a unit and we have a settled contract The increase, unless it is inconsistent with what has been agreed upon, is binding upon the board, and this is almost ministerial. in
Yeah,
certain
I would
ways.
say I'm not, I don't have issues with things that I've, agreed with in the past and was with respect to being part of any contract agreement, I'm not referring to something
I understand.
I've already agreed to.
Yes, I'm sorry, Ron.
K2 we're tabling
Yes.
till when? Next meeting.
K2.
Next meeting, those are student discipline, and we were not able to fully brief the board on what those were this evening, so we're going to table them.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, Mr. Boyce.
Mr. Acetola?
Yes on everything but the salary noted on attachment 1 for Donna Evangelista.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes on everything, but present, but taking no action on the contracts for principals, assistant principals, supervisors, and seekers.
Ms. Canario?
Yes on everything.
Mr. Lawson?
Voting present but taking no action on H3 on page 7, the change of status for Patrick McGravenus, and in attachment 1, page 23, the salaries for Mrs. Lawson and Patrick McGravenus. Otherwise, yes.
Mr. Messinger?
I am voting yes for everything. If we focus on H2, I vote yes for all the names listed in the agenda. I vote no for the names on attachment number 1 under the heading of reappointment of personnel for the 2013-14 school year.
Mrs. Sotera?
I vote yes on everything except for Donna Evangelista on page 21 of 31.
Ms. Tomazic?
Vote yes, except for H2, Donna Evangelista.
Mr. Moses?
Yes on all items with the exception of the salary for Donna Evangelista that's listed on attachment number 1.
Okay.
All right. Okay, old business. New business. I have agenda. Motion to close the meeting.
Yes, that's why.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So shall you say, so shall it be done. Swat, sweet, sweet.